The music you just heard is your invitation to settle in and prepare for our worship service. Oh, that didn't work. Please know that whoever you are, wherever you are from, whomever you love, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Whether you are here in the sanctuary or watching at home, whether you are with us for the first time or the 1,000th, we are glad you're here. My name is Lionel Laguerre. My pronouns are he, him. I am honored to serve as your lay leader this morning. You might have heard, long-time listener, first-time caller. This is my first time up here, so please be gentle. San Gabriel is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association. We're a movement working for a just, peaceful, and sustainable world. Sustaining each other here in community is one part of that work.
Good morning. I'm Eric Hepburn. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm honored to serve as your pulpiteer. For those of you who don't know, today is a Congregational Read day, so we're going to have a more interactive message part of the service than usual. If you didn't do your homework, you are still welcome here. If you feel a little lost, that's all right. Just take it as encouragement to pick up the book so that next month at this time, you'll be on the same page as the rest of us. But we're going to cover enough ground. You won't feel too lost for too long, I promise. Please join me in reciting the words to light our chalice. We light this flame to remind us love is the center. As we grow and connect, mature and deepen, love remains the center. When the light of truth burns all else away, love remains. Let us greet this day in song. Our opening hymn is Enter, Rejoice, and Come In, number 361 in the gray hymnal. Lyrics will be projected. Please rise in body or spirit as you're able. Laura's the boss. She's like, nah, we're done with this one. I agree, Laura. Good choice. Fantastic. All right, folks. Sometimes we are carrying something on our heart that can stop us from being fully present. Here in this community, our sharing of these things with one another is medicine. It is a form of healing. And like all good medicine, it must be concentrated and potent. So I beg you to aim at 2 strong sentences in your sharing. So if you are carrying a sorrow on your heart right now, I invite you to raise your hand for the microphone and share with your community. And while you are practicing your vulnerability and grief, the rest of us will do our best to practice giving you the gift of attention, presence, and deep listening. Thank you for sharing. And for all the joys that remain unspoken, we join you in thanks and praise. It is time for the Wonder Box. There you go. Would you like to help bring it forward today? Albie? Now the box is behind you, brother. Yes, Dave. Yeah, you can shout out a guess. Flashlight. Oh, flashlight. I made the clue too easy this week. Thank you so much, Albie. I appreciate that. All right. So when your pulpiteer makes the written guess too easy, for the grown-ups in the crowd, we get instantaneous guesses. Yes, flashlight. Oh, that was bright. That was just mean of me to do that to you. All right. Yes, our clue this week and the item in the Wonder Box is in fact a flashlight, which figures prominently in our story this morning that I'm going to share from you. It comes to you from our read, and it is a story from the life of Prentis Hemphill. In the 4th grade, we were asked to study a figure we admired in early American history and present a report. Dressed as that person to the class, the assignment came from my teacher, Mrs. Jefferson, a tall, thin, middle-aged black woman with a bootleg British accent who looked down on you over the rim of her glasses. I'd chosen Harriet Tubman. We'd read about her only briefly, a few paragraphs accompanied by a picture of a black woman holding a lantern. Yet, despite the tiny corner of the page given to her in our history book, I knew she was the most important person I'd ever encountered. As I read, the ground had shaken under my feet. Her story lifted off the page and called everything into question: the legality, the morality, the humanity of this history. An inscrutable tension had entered the room when slavery was first discussed. Miss Jefferson taught it at a distance, as words, dates to remember, hurrying us through the unfortunate time. We didn't talk about what it really meant or draw any meaningful lines between the beliefs of that time and our own. I could tell, though, by the furtive glances and the smirks, by Miss Jefferson's enforced silence, that the time was not exactly over. It was here, now. And somehow I knew that my role was not to press it or feel it, to ask anyone else to do so, but to give everyone reprieve, accept the order, and store slavery as my own personal shame. The only place I had to do that was my own body, so I put as much as I could in my downward gaze. But at the end of the section on slavery, when we got to those few paragraphs on Harriet Tubman, her story came around and sat me up straight. She had escaped slavery and led scores of others to freedom through channels called the Underground Railroad. The details on the page were so scarce that most of us imagined an actual tunnel dug through the earth, connecting to an underground hatch in people's homes. This official textbook story neglected what I sensed was there, that Harriet represented something much more dangerous and holy than the book let on. She was the freedom forefathers alluded to but were terrified of. She was the true story at the heart of this country, the contradiction and pursuit, the hidden pulse under the war drums, a black woman in a white man's vision for the world. She broke the spell for me at a time when I was learning what was expected of me. My mom had helped me assemble the outfit, tied my straightened hair up in her nighttime headscarf, clinched a white sheet at the waist with a belt to make something of a dress. I held her worn-out Sunday Bible in one hand, and across my shoulder slung a tote bag filled with shredded cotton balls. I held a flashlight in the other hand, my lantern. I'd never really enjoyed dressing up, but dressing up as Harriet, I wasn't in costume as much as I was being fortified. At that time, you couldn't have told me I wasn't a superhero. I walked into school proud, defiant, straight-backed. Miss Jefferson's expression was blank when I showed up in her class, as though she thought that if she stayed very still, the others might not see the resemblance between us. She stood behind the kids, her eyes fixed on me when they asked, "Who are you supposed to be? Are you some kind of slave?" I waited until their giggles died down and declared that I was Harriet Tubman, that I freed people under their noses. I said it as a dare. Neither the other kids nor Miss Jefferson said another word. When I gave my report, I talked slowly and met each person's eye. The shame left my body then. I felt strong, determined, and I could, at least in that moment, see through all that was unacknowledged and unspoken in our class. All right, all children and youth wishing to go to their groups are welcome to exit. And everyone else, I invite you to join me in singing them out to their classes. Go now in peace, go now in peace. All right, folks, I have a treat for you this morning. Mel Moss and TJ Sang and Jackie Karash are going to perform for us their rendition of Schadenfreude, an original composition by Natalie Venetia Belkin and Rick Lyon.
Very nice, Mel.
I didn't say it was nice, but everybody does it.
D'you ever clap when a waitress falls and drops a tray of glasses?
Yeah.
And ain't it fun to watch figure skaters falling on their tuchus?
Sure.
Don't you feel all warm and cozy watching people out in the rain?
You bet.
That's Schadenfreude, making people pleasure in your pain.
Oh, Schadenfreude, huh? What's that? Some kind of Nazi word?
Well, it is German for happiness at the misfortune of others.
Happiness at the misfortune of others. That is German. Watching a vegetarian being told she just ate chicken.
Or watching a singer realize he just forgot his lyrics.
Being on an elevator when somebody shouts, "Hold the door!" No!
Schadenfreude. Sorry, lady, that's what stairs are for.
Oh, how about straight A students getting B's?
Seniors when they lose their keys.
Waking dormant from their naps.
Watching tourists reading maps.
Football players getting tackled.
CEOs getting shackled.
Watching actors never reach the ending of their Oscar speech.
Schadenfreude. 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 The world needs people like you and me who've been knocked around by fate. 'Cause when people see us, they don't want to be us, and that makes them feel great.
Sure, we provide a vital service to society.
You and me, Schadenfreude,
Making the world a better place. Making the world a better place. Making the world a better place to be.
SCHADE and FREUDE.
I invite you into a place of deeper stillness and reflection. Today's reading comes from the book Freedom Dreams, The Black Radical Imagination by Robin D.J. Kelly. It is the quote that opens this month's chapter of our Congregational Read. Without new visions, we don't know what to build, only what to knock down. We not only end up confused, rudderless, and cynical, but we forget that making a revolution is not a series of clever maneuvers and tactics, but a process that can and must transform us.
We forget that making a revolution is not a series of clever maneuvers and tactics, but a process that can and must transform us. This quote opens the book. It's from Grace Lee Boggs in her book, Revolution and Evolution in the 20th Century. A revolution involves making an revolutionary leap toward becoming more socially responsible and more self-critical human beings. In order to transform the world, we must transform ourselves. So, I'm really glad for our anthem today to mix in some levity into a relatively serious book. So I shared with you one story from our read today. I'm going to start with a couple other shortened versions of stories from the book to get those of us who, I just want to, I don't believe in shame as a social justice tool. So, but I would like to see who's read the chapter, just to get a sense of, all right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know how much of the audience is on which channel. Because being inclusive isn't something that just happens. It's something you have to do on purpose. It's something you have to be mindful of and aware of. So there are two stories other than the one that I shared this morning from this section of the book that I think are worth hearing again if you've read them, and absolutely worth hearing the first time if you haven't. I was 15 years old when we moved to a new neighborhood, into a house with 2 showers, green grass on the yard, and for the first time, a room of my own. It was the first house my mother had ever bought, the one that gave us a place away from the abuse, and the nicest one I'd ever lived in. That first day, a black family across the street came out to greet us. 2 parents, 4 boys, and a girl who seemed to be my age. While the parents spoke, we kids stared at one another, deciding. The girl broke the line first and asked if I wanted to walk with her to get some ice cream. My mother nodded her approval, and I followed the girl down the street. We walked 4 blocks, engaging in questions about our schools and our friends. It felt like the teen novels I spent every summer reading, moving into a new home, a new neighborhood, and finding an instant best friend. It really felt like a new beginning, like freedom. 2 blocks from the ice cream shop, a white man swung his porch door open and charged at us, red-faced, mid-scream. "You N-words need to leave this neighborhood now." I stood there unable to move for a second before my new friend grabbed my arm. "Come on." We ran without stopping all the way back home. To someone watching, we might have looked like we were playing. 2 black kids, heads pushed high, racing down the middle of the street, but this was not that. We were running in terror, too scared to look over our shoulders in case that man with his red face was close behind. It's not that I hadn't encountered the vitriol of racism before. I had, often, at school and in town, but I had never felt that specific fear in my own neighborhood before, so close to home. When we got back, I was shaking. We told our parents and they scooped us up and we retreated to our homes, but my mother didn't ask many questions of me or say very much at all. I imagine she wasn't surprised. She knew what the world could do. Having grown up in segregated Louisiana, she may have had too many of her own stories running scared to think there was any use in comforting me. I didn't know exactly because she'd never said. Perhaps she'd never been given the room to. That girl and I never got our ice cream that day or any other, and we hardly spoke to each other again. Somehow what had happened seemed the fault of us coming together, of imagining that we could just be kids who got ice cream on a summer afternoon. I never ventured past the end of our block after that. I was terrified of what lay beyond, of the violence my blackness seemed to activate in others. The first time I got up the courage to kiss a girl I liked, I was 16. We stood there afterwards holding hands, basking in that awkward teenage love, when a police car pulled up. Someone had called the cops on us for kissing. "Your parents know you're out here carrying on?" the officer asked. My parents did not know that I was out there carrying on, so I dropped my head and said no. I hadn't anticipated this intrusion. A second earlier, I was filled with teenage urges, that soaring rush of hormones and new love feeling that made the world turn on and show itself to you. Now the color had drained away and my body slammed shut. Take yourselves home then, and I bet not see you out here again. Disoriented and terrified, I complied. I learned the lesson clearly, though. Be careful of believing your life can be your own. For some of us, our visions are a threat to order. We call them microaggressions sometimes. I wonder if that word isn't just a way of diminishing and belittling the impact of the major traumas on top of which those little cuts are added. I think it's worth sitting with these stories for just a minute, maybe reflecting on some hard times that you had when you were that age, and asking what's different about this, especially for those of you who look like me. What's different about this than maybe some of the hardships you experienced that were similar? Later on in life, in her 20s, she's in therapy. She says, I want to know how to love. I want to be able to give love, to show the love I feel, and I want to let it in when someone says that they love me back. One of her clients admits, I want to be a vulnerable leader and a present father to my kids, he says. I want to know that I am worthy and that I can inspire the people I work with to believe in their own worthiness. The section is called Vision. On the back of these hard and heartbreaking stories is the realization that if we think that healing isn't possible, if we think that progress isn't possible, if we think that there is no better world to hand to the next generation, we will simply walk through life doing rearguard actions. It is necessary for us to be able to imagine a healthier future in order to find the narrow path that leads to that place. Now, as our opening quote said, this is not just an act of strategy. One of the mistakes we make, I think, is we imagine that world and then we think we can manipulate it into existence. Sometimes we think if we could just get rid of that 46% of people who vote the other way. Do you ever think that? Oh, I heard the applause earlier when a name was mentioned, so I don't really need you to answer that question. But what if you can't go without them? That's the hard truth I want to invite you into, and that Prentis is going to invite you into this book. You can't go without them. You can think of them as an anchor, you can think of them as whatever you want to think of them as, but there is no cutting it loose. This is the realization of the bodhisattvas. There is no complete and total liberation for you individually free of everyone else's liberation. This is the message of liberation theology. We are either all free or none of us are. We are engaged across the spectrum in a variety of struggles to understand and embrace what that freedom might mean, what it could be like, what it could feel like or taste like, or whether we can learn to trust ourselves enough to know that we can take the next step toward a future that's not just apocalypse, but toward a future that's the kind of thing we would be proud to leave our children with. I did a sermon a few months back asking if people could imagine a world without violence, and my very brave friend Molly Hornbuckle, of course, raised her head and said, no, I cannot. And I imagine she spoke for many of you who are just less likely to raise your hand than Molly. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? We look at what's happening in Israel and Gaza right now, and it's hard to imagine a world where people don't think they can use violence against one another to get to heaven. Heaven on earth, heaven in the afterlife, whichever version you prefer to envision. It's hard to imagine a world where people don't think, power is power, and I just got to have power over other people, and then my vision can win. My vision of the future can win over other people's vision of the future. Here's the spiritual challenge. If you're really talking about the vision, I think the Venn diagram overlap between your vision of the future you hope for your kids or your nieces or your nephews or just the next generation of human beings or the next generations of dogs, cats, horses, plants, and other life on this planet. I think if you really got down to brass tacks about the most important, central, and critical parts of that vision, it's not different from that 47% who you can't relate to. They don't want a worse world for their children. They don't want their children dead in a bloody heap in a school shooting. But we might need each other to learn how to walk a path together that gets us there instead of just talking about it. Now, there have been a lot of hard conversations, and there will continue to be in the political realm right now because there's disingenuous behavior happening. And it is difficult to develop trust relationships when either you know people are not being honest with you, or when you feel like they've become incapable of being honest with themselves. And that's being played out perhaps in a way that's very public and overt. Are you really fully honest with yourself? I'm not. I struggle to be. But if I'm honest, I don't win, I don't succeed every day in that struggle to be honest with myself. My blind spots are still my blind spots. They're the things I can't see about myself. Learning, I didn't know it was going to be a prop. Maybe it's not. There it is. Learning how to shine a light in that dark corner that I couldn't see before. That's a lot of work for human beings. We need each other for that work of seeing around that corner in ourselves. We need somebody or many people in our lives who are willing to go peek around that corner for us and tell us what they saw in a way that is filled with love and kindness and compassion that we can hear. And we have to be willing to be curious enough to want to hear what they have to say. And that's not always true either, is it? That we're curious enough to want to know what's around that corner. That lie that we were told early in life about our brokenness or our unworthiness, well, hell, that might come true if I look around that corner. I might see something about myself that I find hard to love, that I find hard to accept. That's the work, though. See, your work isn't to fix that 47%. I know how many people are out there telling you that it is. You either have to beat them or fix them. Right? Am I wrong? Is that not the message out there? You must beat them or fix them. And I bet if I asked you to raise your hand about how many people think they're fixable, I wouldn't get as many hands as I got earlier. You want to do the test? How many people think that they're fixable? All right, we got a few dyed-in-the-wool optimists like me in this room, and thank God for that. We're going to keep working through this book. I've got some more quotes. You all know me. I could stand up here and do this all day long. But what I want to do is I want to take the reflections bit that we usually do after I talk, and we're going to wrap it into how we do Congregational Read Day. So I'm going to ask Lionel to get up with the microphone. And if you didn't do your homework, but you heard something I said that either resonated with you, either as a deep truth that you think needs to be repeated in a new way in your own voice, amen to that. If you heard something that you think is just so misguided and off base that you have to let me know about it, you should share that. If you read something in the book that I haven't mentioned yet that really struck you deeply, either in a way that's challenging or in a way that reaffirms some deep suspicion you have about the human condition, I want you to share that. So, what's on your heart, folks? Share with me, share with each other. This is practice for that small group work we're going to be doing. So this is practice. Dave Pracken. Yes, sir.
In the first chapter, when the two girls were going down for ice cream and they got scared away, I was really upset that they never connected again. Very upset. I don't know why.
Well, I think that's what I was trying to get at when I said that the little microaggression cuts aren't the big thing, right? Like, these are the negative, unintended, long-term consequences of living under constant oppression. It short-circuits a friendship while it's a seed just trying to poke its little green tendrils through the earth. And if that's not worth being sad and heartbroken about, I don't know what is. I mean, and also I want to acknowledge her skill as a writer, right? She talks about, like, I thought I got to be in that moment. Like the one moment that's in all those teen novels where I moved into a new neighborhood and suddenly, instant, magical, girl my age, best friend. I mean, it opens up a cornucopia of future possibilities that you can taste in her language, and you can smell in the air the promise of a lifelong friendship, the promise of days spent wandering around the neighborhood, going to the park, getting in trouble together. All of it snuffed out like that. If you can't grieve that for that little girl, and if you can't recognize that this is one story pointing at a mountain of facts, a mountain of stories just like that, then you're not taking the racism problem in this country with the gravity that it has earned. That is the story. That is the story of disconnection and oppression and the way that it lands in individual human lives. And it is worth grieving, and it is heartbreaking. Thank you, Dave.
Good morning. I'm Woody Hibbard. And Eric, while I was doing my homework, I came across the passage, I believe it was in the preface of the book. The author made the statement that they feel that healing, individual healing, and justice, social justice, need to occur simultaneously at the same time. Am I correct?
Yes.
Good, okay. And that prompted recall of a question I heard by some social scientists a few decades back. I don't recall who it was or where they said it or where I read it or whatever, but the question went something like this. How good an individual will society permit? And conversely, how good a society will individuals permit? And I believe that, since we've stood upright as a species, we've been trying to answer that question. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how, I didn't read ahead, so I don't know how the author is going to tackle this, but I think that probably they've taken on the most difficult question that I've dealt with. And I don't think we've really found an answer to it yet. So let's see what happens. It'll be a fun ride.
I hope so. I hope it will be a fun ride. Not because it is without heartbreak or struggle or pain or difficulty, but because, like a good workout, at the end of it, despite the soreness, despite the fatigue, you might feel like you got somewhere. In a world where often you feel like the hopes of getting somewhere are thwarted at every turn. Can I get an amen? Do you feel like you're living in a world some days where attempts at progress are thwarted at every turn? Well, I want to propose this to you. We've talked about the 6X. You can go ahead and walk over. We've talked about the 6X negativity bias. The 6X negativity bias. So the human being and all DNA-based life forms, as far as we can tell through science, are 6 times more sensitive to negative information than to positive information. So you're 6 times more attentive to threats than promises. This is carried out in a bunch of research from microbes all the way up through human beings. Now, here's the thing. I've developed this phrase that I've been using with my son back there. And this is the test to see if he's listening or on his headphones. I think he's on his headphones because he didn't look up at me. So, it's neither as bad as you fear, nor as good as you hope. Right? Like, most of us walk into most moments in life with those 2 bookends kind of accessible to us, right? We're prognosticating about a range of things, and we can, if we pause for a minute, kind of articulate the worst case scenario that's haunting us. If this doesn't go well, this is how bad it's going to be. And we can usually articulate some version of like, well, if every single thing goes right, this is how awesome it could be. And have you noticed that the truth is almost always in between those bookends? But interesting, rarely super close to either of them, right? So it's neither as bad as you fear, nor as good as you hope. We had a hand over here.
Well, now I have 2 things. Your last point, things don't get as good as you hope or as bad as you fear. That's been a mantra of mine for a long time. It got me through the years 2016 to 2020. So far, they haven't gotten as good as I hope, but come real close to as bad as I fear. Second thing, let's go. This is more of a confession. I'm in 2 Buddhist meditation groups, and it promotes the same view. This idea of a boundary between us and them is artificial. We're all fellow sufferers. However, confession. All right, we can all grieve with the 2 little girls whose friendship was crushed at the beginning. What about the guy who came out of the house yelling racial epithets? I'm going to confess I don't feel any compassion for him, and I'd love to see him humiliated. I know I should realize this. He's suffering, and this is his misguided way of trying to find happiness and freedom from suffering. And really, that's just kinship with my suffering and looking for ways. We're all in the same boat. But you know what? To hell with him. I'm sorry, that's still where I am on this road. Maybe someday I'll get to that other place. But those, we're still confronted with stuff like that.
So, yes. So here's the thing that I tell my son. If that had been him, and there have been moments in our life that paralleled that, where he came home and had a moment of confrontation out in the world. Here's the question I start with. Was that about you? Was it really about you? And almost always the answer is no. So another author, maybe we'll get around to reading him one day. If you have room in your heart, your library, and your head to do it, read him as soon as you can. His name is Resmaa Menakem, and he wrote a book called My Grandmother's Hands. Now that book is a somatic healing book. It very much, I would say that Prentis is in the second wave of somatic healers after him. He wrote this book several years ago. It's a really outstanding book. Here's how he describes what you're talking about. That man who ran off his porch is blowing out his trauma through other people who are in no way like really the valid targets of that trauma. But the result of embodied racism is that they are made targets in the same way that some people who you may or may not have known or heard of in life kick their dog when they're mad. If something is not fully human in your worldview, that thing might be kind of like hitting a pillow. You're entitled to do whatever you want to take out your emotions through anything that's not on a moral equal footing with you. Now, later in the book, there's a section called Expanding Our We. As we let our we grow bigger and encompass more people, more living things, all living things, we start to think, oh, maybe the Jainists were onto something. Like maybe taking out my rage on any living thing is a pretty not okay thing to do. So I struggle to generate compassion for that person as well. And it is a symptom of that person's unresolved trauma. And we all deserve to have our traumas healed. Here's what I want you to identify with. Maybe your traumas and your worldview didn't intersect to where you thought you could run off your porch and empty your bad day into a couple of children of color playing in your neighborhood. And thank God for that. Thank God that didn't happen to you. But I think each one of us in here can relate to moments when we were having a bad day and we took it out on somebody or something that didn't deserve it. Can I get an amen? That's your entry. That's your entry to compassion. It's not false equivalency. It's not excuse making or justifying what that person did or trying to make it okay. It's acknowledging that the same pattern that operates in them operates in you, and you have been there. You have been there. Now, maybe your parents were enlightened enough to not teach you racism. But maybe like Christy Nome's family, they had a very callous view about pets and farm animals. I'm going to tell you straight up, folks. I grew up with family members who will shoot a dog or put a cow down or a pig or any other number of animals if they're not fitting into farm life. That is the culture of those places. It's not done out of cruelty, and it's not done out of anything. I understand, as somebody who has now been a city folk person for most of the rest of my life, I understand the disconnect that city folk who are pet owners have with this concept. And so if you don't know any farm folk, it's real easy and convenient for you to sit in Judgment Day about what somebody else did and why they did it and how they must just be an awful person. No, they might just be a person different than you. They might just be a person different than you. We have to figure out how to stop dehumanizing each other no matter what. No matter what. Now, I told a story a couple weeks ago about a young man who did heinous and atrocious crimes. And somebody got curious enough to figure out why that happened in his life, and they found out. And it gives all of us a window into how trauma gets spread and how dangerous it is and how bad the outcomes can be if you're on the other end of somebody who's experienced a bunch of trauma, blowing that trauma out. We saw it in Georgia not very long ago. Right? We're seeing, this wave of school shootings is what it is. It is the blowing out of trauma through people who are not appropriate avenues for that emotional processing by people who are not being presented with other ways. It's mildly off topic, as you know I want to be, mildly off topic, but here's the thing. I grew up in this culture, and I was in my 40s before I figured out that if I run every day and do yoga every day, my ability to not blow my crap out through other people, wow, I can make it like days, weeks, sometimes months without misguidedly blowing my residue on other people. Now, why on earth would I have to wait 40 years to learn that? Why are we not teaching these skills to our children in preschool and school? Oh my gosh, you guys, if you get exercise and you don't put garbage in your body and you learn how to find some quietness among all the mental noise and you learn your worthiness, oh wait, then you don't have to act your trauma out on the world. We can actually kind of heal it. Oh, shocking. But we're too busy arguing about standardized testing and cutting school budgets so that we can double down on STEM so that we can compete with the Chinese. It's just so misguided, it makes me crazy. Because it's not fundamental to the skills that we need to show up in our lives. It's mistaking the artificial game of politics and economy for the real game of ecology. We are in a real game here. And by game, I mean there's a thing here, it's got rules, the rules are non-negotiable. We can call them physics, we can call them the laws of life, we can call them a bunch of things. We are in a real game as a species on this skin bubble of a planet that we live on. We are in a real situation. Now, as an adaptation method, we developed some of games of our own devising to help us navigate the bigger game. But the truth is, at this moment in our history, we have lost sight of the big game because we've gotten too obsessed with playing the little game. We got too obsessed with playing the game of power or prestige or money, social standing, nationalism, allegiance, all of it. We're letting these made-up games that we made up substitute for the reality with which we cannot avoid attending. And we prioritize the little games we've made up over the real game that we are playing. Have you ever taken a kid to a soccer game and they're the kid that sits down and starts picking flowers in the middle of the field? That's us. Geopolitics, picking flowers in the middle of the soccer field. Maybe it doesn't feel that misguided to you. Maybe you think that those systems are our only chance. Here's the thing, folks. A tool is only a tool as long as you remember it's a tool. Once you think that that tool is the whole world, it uses you. You don't use it anymore. Eckhart Tolle writes this about the human mind and human cognition. If you think that you are every thought that you have and your ability to think, you are the tool of your mind, not the other way around. Find the off switch, learn to meditate. Then the mind becomes something you can use to make your vision a reality, not the thing that constantly whispers fears into your ear that you can't help but believe. All right, we got time for a couple more comments. Thank you, Chuck.
Unfortunately, I've completely forgotten what I was going to say.
I'm sorry, brother. I'll own that one.
So I was touched by the story, and as you started talking about microaggression, it brought up something in my experience. So as a lot of you know, my neighborhood was very diverse, but that didn't mean we always got along or that everything was perfect. My mom, so I grew up in the late 60s and 70s. So it was when I was a kid. My mom grew up in the 30s and 40s, and so she always taught us that we had to, and this is coming from the system, right? So she grew up in Mississippi, and so she always taught us that we had to try twice as, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard it, we had to work twice as hard to be seen as half as good. Right, and so she took that especially in education, I won't say to an extreme, but that was very prevalent in our house. So I studied, and I like to study. I like to learn things. So as a young kid, I studied all the time. I was smart. I'd always raise my hand in class, ask follow-on questions, all of that sort of thing that you want a student to do. The result of that was a very lonely place for me for a long time. And the reason is, when black kids, saw this and they felt that it was something that they weren't we weren't supposed to do, right? And I had always had this accent because I grew up, before we moved to the States, I was in Italy. I never got the American, I got this Midwestern accent, right? So, so when I'd raise my hand and tell the answer and just get good grades, all of that stuff, and my voice, the black kids would say, "Oh, you're trying to be white," right? So I couldn't really hang out with the black kids, right? Because they thought I was trying to suck up to whitey, right? The white kids, right, would, and I'm not saying everybody, but the white kids would do the reverse and say, "Oh, you're very smart, you're very well spoken, right? You must be one of the good ones." Right? And so that's where I lived, in the middle of that, while just trying to be a kid who wanted to learn about ants and Space Lab and all of that sort of thing. So for a long time, I stopped. But through middle school, I got terrible grades, right? I learned everything, I just didn't show it, right? And it wasn't until like high school when I found a crew of misfits, right, that I could hang out with, and I wasn't so lonely. But when I got to college, I came back to my neighborhood, right, and now I'm considered to be like too uppity, right, for both groups of people. It's like, so I couldn't win, and that actually, so those microaggressions, it's not those kids' fault. They learned that stuff. It's just, the system kind of forced that that to happen. And as I grew up, it took me a very long time to get to the point where I just I don't care what anyone thinks, right? But that's still kind of lonely, right? I'd rather be in relationship with people than to have to like carry this kind of micro trauma that seems so small that I don't really like to talk about it, right? But it has affected me through the course of my life. So when we talk about microaggressions, that's the kind of stuff I think we're talking about.
Thank you so much for sharing, Chuck. Anybody else?
I'm Lacey. I think everybody's catching on pretty quick. There's a lot in my head. Last week you said something about like when your mind goes quiet, there's still something. I'm like, minds don't go quiet. That doesn't happen. What are you talking about? But yeah. Reading, I did half the homework. Reading through the preface, it got a lot of questions stirring, and hopefully I'm not going to insult anybody. But immediately when we seen the Black Lives Matter things, my mind started questioning and saying, like, where are we going with this? But continuing to read, I think that the author was, as they like to say, a credit to the race or the movement or whatever. She did a really well job of breaking it down, and the things she addressed with her organization and the problems were kind of where I came from too, and so that I loved it. She kind of addressed it when they said like it kept growing and all of the social pressures and the political pressures, they kind of lost their vision, like their shape, like what are we doing, what is our purpose here, and what is it, and everybody can't, as they grow, everybody loses that vision, and so their motivations can't stay as pure or as good. And so I think that's kind of what she addressed in there. And I question, like, do social movements, are they positive or are they negative? Like, are we bringing change or are we creating further isolation by saying us and them? And these radical movements that we're putting on, this other group is looking at it, they're not reciprocating it, they're not respecting it, they're not getting understanding from it. They're putting that bubble around them and saying that's their business, that's their thing, that's them. And we are not that, and we don't agree with that, and we don't have that. And so that came up a lot for me during the preface, but hearing how the author wrote it and worked through these things, it was very promising, and so it was very uplifting still. But that was a question I had, is are these movements for the good, or are they further isolating us?
So I'll take a quick stab at that. Do I have one last hand, or are we good? No. So I think the reason I picked this book, and to answer Lou's preemptory question that he asks me every week, which is, what do you want us to take home? What I want you to take home from this book is that when we walk into social movement thinking, I have to defeat those people, I have to change those people, I have to fix those people, we create social movements that have an undercurrent of toxicity in them because we're not taking ownership of the one thing we can do. Wait, what's see these two thumbs? This guy. This is who I have control is too much of a word. This is who I have a modicum of influence over. This guy right here is the only guy in the whole universe over whom I have a modicum of influence. As we move out, it gets less and less. So, this book, I think, is critically important. I think that what's coming out of both Black Lives Matter and Me Too is transformative to the understanding of social movements for the following very simple reason. We cannot go fix others. We have to heal all of us, and healing work has to start at home. And I'm going to fix you versus I would like to help you heal. I hope you can hear the radical difference between those two statements. And you will hear in social movements on the right and the left and the middle and all over the place, people who are showing up with this, I'm going to fix you because you're wrong energy. This is the main thing that I want us to short circuit in our work through this book over the next 8 or 9 months. I want us to short circuit the impulse that the lion's share of the work is out there with all those people who need to get their stuff correct. How are they going to learn that? It's a simple proposition. I am proposing to you that the only way, the only point of entree that you have is to model doing your work in community. Whatever your triggers are, whatever thing happens in your life that makes you want to blow out trauma through another person, whatever bad habits of microaggressions you have based on race or gender or political affiliation or country of national origin, you deal with your stuff and then you become a model for other folks about how to deal with their stuff. I know it sounds overly simplistic, and it is. And nonetheless, I would submit to you, true. Nonetheless, I would submit to you that it is truly the core of what you can do to bring about the world that I know you dream of. I know how vulnerable it is to admit that what you hope for is to learn how to love and be loved. I know that you all want to show up as vulnerable and productive parents and aunts and uncles and friends and family members and community members. I know that's what you want to learn. And I know that admitting that is a tender thing. It is not a trivial thing. We're asking people to put aside the trivial. If I had enough power, maybe I could just fix stuff without revealing the tender needs of my own heart. If I had enough power or enough money, maybe I could fix the world without having to go there. The lesson of this moment and of this book is that is just another illusion that you must shed. You have to learn to go there. To go to the place where you can find your love for that screaming dude running off his porch. And it is exactly as hard as it sounds. Robert, I'm going to give you the last word.
To reinforce the modeling, I was very impressed to have read several years ago neuroscientists observing that in our brains we have mirroring neurons which automatically reflect back what comes into them.
Amen. I don't think science and religion have been at war for a long time. And just like we were talking about with social justice movements, a lot of it was misguided finger pointing. But I think if we listen deeply, our spirit, the wisdom that's coming up to us through our own practices and through the voices of our siblings in the world today, and many of those siblings are scientists. There is a heart to all those Venn diagrams that is the bright light of truth that the sages spoke of. Religion and science are not at odds. People who demand that they be right and that they have certainty are at odds with one another. The truth is unmoved. I'm going to leave you this morning with this brief quote from the end of the chapter. Our ability to dream of something different, to name longing, to articulate vision, and commit to it directly correlates to the likelihood that we will experience it, that it will be realized.
We take offering each week to sustain this spiritual home and to support the work of our fellowship. If you are visiting, we invite you to fill out a visitor card, which you can put in the plate or return to the visitor table in the back. For offertory music, we have Together at Last by Alex French, performed by Larvia.
All right, we did reflections and resonances during the service, so we're going to go ahead and move straight into announcements. If you're called to share an announcement with your siblings, now is the time. I've got two of my own that I want to make. First is right after the service, right back there at the bench around where the kids are gathered, we're going to have a very brief 15 to 20 minute or less meeting with the families with children. I'll be involved in that meeting. Mr. Spoon and Hush will all be there, and we'd like to meet with the families for a few minutes and do a little bit of charting a course for the next few months. So the other one is please stay tuned on your email. I'm doing my best to put together these connections groups. It's probably going to ask a little more flexibility of you ultimately than maybe you'd like, because all of us would like the following thing. This would be the ideal one night of the month when it would happen, and it would happen exactly when, where, and how I would like. Aren't there 8 other people who want the same thing as me? And the answer is no, not among 46 of you, there aren't. But what I'm going to try and do is draw the best overlap diagram that I can. And I want you to be honest with me in your email responses and honest with yourself about not just what you prefer, but what's possible for you. Maybe Thursday nights are the ideal night for you. And if you can make Tuesday night work and that makes life better for 8 of your colleagues, please do. Just please be as flexible as you can be while still being honest with yourself about what does and doesn't work for you. That's what I ask as we move through this process. Other announcements?
Thank you. Just a final reminder, next Sunday, the 22nd, is the beginning of John Ray's class on the guiding principles and values of Unitarian Universalism. Now, we've advertised this for the last couple of months in the newsletter and online, this sort of thing. And we mentioned that no registration is required. Well, we'd like to qualify that just a little bit. We really need to know, have some idea of what the participation is going to be, so we can set up the fellowship house. So if you wouldn't mind, we would appreciate it if after the service, there's a sign-up sheet back there, Pat's holding it up, and we don't need names or whatever, you can just put your initials and the number of people that would like to attend in your party. So 1 per family or groups or whatever. Also, there is a course description back there, and Dr. Ray is with us today in the back, John. So if you have any questions about his class, you can touch base with him as well. Thank you.
And you're meeting before church, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot to mention that. 9:30 to 10:20. So 50-minute class, and it will run for 6 weeks, 6 consecutive Sundays.
All right.
And any other questions, you can direct it to Dr. Ray. Thank you.
And thanks to Dr. Ray and Woody and those who have helped coordinate this. Genuinely appreciated.
To follow up on that, also next Sunday after the service, we're having our orientation session, and a lot of you have signed up already, but if you're interested in signing up, we'd like to kind of get a head count as well. There's a little blurb about it in the half announcement sheet. And then secondly, I know Michelle has postcard things, but she'll be back next week. She had to leave. But it dawned on me that the Texas powers that be are trying to remove people from the voter polls. And if you haven't already checked, even if you've been registered for decades, check your voter registration. And if you want some help figuring out how to do that, I printed off a half sheet to give you.
I'll follow up because I thought Pat was going to announce something else, which is, next week after service orientation class. She said it. I'll be there. Sorry, I got distracted.
Just a couple of quick community announcements. On the 28th will be the Georgetown Powwow from 1 to 5 at the Boys and Girls Club. the following Sunday, October 5th, will be Fiesta Georgetown. And then on the 22nd, for families, there'll be a little mini powwow kind of demonstration, like a dance demonstration, a craft fair at the library, put on by Ben Nava. So that'll be in the afternoon on the 22nd.
Hi, I'm Billy Adams, and I'm team lead for the Habitat Group. And if a lot of you probably are new and don't know what that is, but it means that when we've planted all of these flowers that are around all three of our buildings, they are native Texas plants to support the wildlife that in many places is so threatened right now. So our campus is doing what we can to help them. So we're going to meet on the deck at 10 o'clock, not this coming Tuesday, but the next. I'll get it in the announcement. And if you'd just like to join us, it's an informal meeting. You can find out some of what we do, and we have a good time digging in the dirt and watching the critters. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll take a round of applause for the grounds team because they do a fantastic job. And that appropriately leads us into a last announcement.
Hi, I'm Pam Hibbert, and we have some last-minute sign-ups for connections groups. We still have some paper forms back here. If you didn't get signed up, today's the day. Thank you.
All right. I'm sorry, I'm going to do an informal poll here. We have been running an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes on Sundays. And I know that it used to be shorter than that. So I'm going to give you 3 opportunities to raise your hand. Too short, just right, or too long. We're going to do them in that order. Too short, just right, too long. There's no wrong answer. I just want to know where everybody lands on this. Are the current services too short? That was predictable. Just right? Too long? All right. Thank you. I told you all that you all weren't going to have the same answer. You don't all want the same things, and you're not all at the same place, but we will do our best to strike a balance that's good enough for everybody. All right. Thank you for the data. I appreciate that. Anybody got any gratitudes to share? And if you just raised your hand and said service was too long, I didn't write those lines about 2-sentence discipline for myself, which isn't because I don't need it. Any gratitudes people would like to share? All right, we had some gratitude shared earlier. We will just say this. Thank you all for this and more. We are all deeply grateful. Our final hymn this morning is number 1023 in the Teal hymnal, Building Bridges. Lyrics will be projected. Please rise in body or spirit as you're able. Sing through 2 times. 2 times. We're going to sing it through 2 times.
Bridges,
As we prepare to return to the world, we remind ourselves through our affirmation to carry our work from this place to every corner of our lives. Please join me in the call and response. The doctrine of this church is love. We are here to love. The quest of truth is its sacrament. We are here to learn. Service is its prayer. We are here to care for others. To dwell together in peace. We are here to live in peace. To seek knowledge is freedom. We are here to honor our differences. To serve humanity in fellowship. We are all connected in spirit. To the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. We are here to grow. Thus do we covenant with one another. This we promise to do together. Please join me in reciting the words to extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame to remind us love is the center. Rest, engage and heal. And all we see is cold ashes, love remains.
I offer you today as a benediction the following words. May you find questions more profound than answers, play more proficient than mastery, vulnerability more powerful than invincibility, supplication more productive than control, and a peace that passeth all understanding. Go in peace.